Anyway, tonight we've got Orion back again to finish up. I have posted, and I will post again, I'll put in the chat for anyone who is here and missed the first time around. I will put a link to to where part 1 was on. I will not promise one way or the other whether anything is going to be recapped. But he said there was far more that needed to be said, and so we are all eagerly here waiting for him to tell us more. Orion, I just thought that I wanted to share with you too. Sean shared with us, shared with Facebook, that tonight, Wednesday, September 29th, is Jupiter, Mercury, Neptune, Pluto, Saturn, Uranus, that's 6 planets are in retrograde, along with Chiron and the north node of the moon. It becomes nearly impossible not to re-engage with the past relationships, feelings you thought you buried, and even clear memories of the past will come back to us. Be very careful. Do not engage in fights. Learn the lesson and let it go. I am a great proponent of letting people experience to take advantage of the positive aspects of any retrograde. I mean, Mercury retrograde is really good for some things, but we all get well, it's our favorite scapegoat. But with that much retrograde going on, this is a really good time to do inner work. And
well, yeah, because Mercury retrograde and any communications retrograde is kind of like wearing Moldavite. You like that, Orion?
Yep. So you didn't even have to explain it, right? You said it and you knew.
Well, it's like when you're wearing opal. Opal is a lovely stone for the freaking Libras who bloody can't make up their own mind about anything. But you put it on an Aries or a Leo, and my gosh, they're out of control and wondering if they need medication. Opal is a stone that basically makes you feel everything ever so much more so.
Yep.
And so you don't want to do that to somebody who is already letting their feelings out, but it's really good with those Libras. Which is why it's supposed to be an unlucky stone for people who aren't born in October.
With the metals, and a lot of people don't realize this, of course, gold, bronze, brass to a degree brings through the solar power. But and of course some titanium brings primordial, and silver, the moon. Now, a lot of people don't realize that if you're prone to depression, that you don't want to wear all silver. You've got to balance that with gold. If you're prone to anxiety, you don't want to wear all gold. You want to balance that.
For that. I can vouch for that one. I'm telling you that one. I can't wear gold for that long.
Really? Wow.
If you're prone to both, actually, and are otherwise receiving conventional treatment for that, a balance of silver and gold is the way to go, you're saying.
Bingo. Yes. That's what I do a lot of, and I like to balance it on both hands. Some people put all on one side, all on the other. I really like that, the balance. And if you're a fire sign, I love that there's all this jewelry made with stainless steel, which is very pretty, but you got to be careful to magnify your fire. Yep.
I'm being a fire sign myself, so.
Oh, what are you?
Well, okay. Aries.
Me too. I knew there was something perfect about you. Yep. Titanium is something that people should in magic should work with if they haven't.
What does
I
titanium
love this stuff.
do?
Well, it is truly the metal of the stars. We're not made. Well, it is made in the stars as well. Iron is the ultimate metal of the stars. That's the only place it's produced. But titanium is in some ways about untarnishability, flexibility, and the ability to be flexible while not losing your shape, which is very important during these big changes that we're in.
Well, yeah, and having watched Adam Savage make an Iron Man suit out of titanium 3D printed no less, which probably cost as much as a house. The idea of how flexible it is and how hard it is and the melting point, obviously an immensely powerful and resilient metal.
And primordial, very primordial, because they do find titanium in meteorites. There's titanium meteorites. I have one. There's some time I'd love to come on. We ought to have a dialogue about some of this. Like, we're used to certain metals, certain stones that we talk about, but then there's the lesser, the ones we don't talk about as much because they're not out in the sort of the general occult and metaphysical talk. But the ancients were playing with things that often get pushed aside because they're maybe not as glitzy or not as attractive visually. And they're the things that have the most incredible power.
And some of what they were doing gets dumped into the bin of alchemy and then hence discarded.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And we're in a place, and this leads well actually into the discussion. Now, how long am I with you tonight? I can't remember. How long am I with you tonight? Is it
for an hour? For
okay.
an hour, but I will not. Well, some people may have to leave at 9 or 9:10. We will. We'll stay on until you're pretty. We'll give you a little leeway.
Okay.
I'm certainly in for the long haul if necessary. So until you run out of things to say.
Oh Lord, Bill, you don't know what that we. Oh my God.
Yes, I do, because I do.
So you're saying we're going to be here all night?
There you go. There you go.
I mean, it's just like, don't get me started, you know? You've seen
probably, I'm going to give my usual thing. Please mute yourself so that when Orion is talking, and turn the mute and then unmute yourself when we are, what is it called? When we're doing questions and answers, and I'm sure Orion will, and they have those little reaction things so you can put up your hand like there. Let me show you like that. You get a little. See
look at that little hand. There's a hand above. Look, it's on my ear. It's now scratching my head.
That allows us to say, "Oh, I did have a question." So
fantastic.
Can I get a question
and then there's
Can I get a question and
that allows us to. So
I know that voice.
Orion, did you get the ginger?
I did. Thank you. You're a saint.
Did you like it?
Of course. It came with your love.
Did you inhale it?
No, I'm still devouring it. It's going to take me a minute. We have to savor such beauties. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, some of the talk we were just having reminds me of, I've taught for years. I was in public health for 20 some years. And I was a busy boy. I opened up 31 drug treatment centers in my career. And I was doing a lot on teaching neurophysiology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics of psychoactive substances. And the reason was, not only did I love treatment and treating folks and helping folks, but also I enjoyed understanding body talk. How does your body preserve your body and your mind preserve its intrapsychic homeostasis. And the body, how's it produce and how's it support its biologic and biochemical homeostasis and the nature of consciousness. So we are at this time right now, and this fits so into what the underworld is about. You see, the overworld is transubstantiating. It allows us to rise out of entanglement in some ways, but it does not let us integrate. So the whole tree of being is where we want to go. So now, for instance, there's a wonderful human consciousness pioneer. If you've not listened to this woman's stuff, let me turn you on to it. Carolyn Mace, but her last name is M-Y-S-S. Someone to really know about. And a couple of years ago, she wrote a book called Defying Gravity. And she was saying how, in the previous sort of movement of consciousness, we learned deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. We learned about gravity. Where we're at now, reason will not get us through. And deductive will not get us through. What we're now turning back into is inductive reasoning and intuitive consciousness, right? So you see your consciousness and how you receive and produce data can work in two ways, inductive, deductive, or reductive or inductive. It can also work with extuitive and intuitive, not words that you're used to intuitive, but you don't hear the words extuitive. Extuitive is really how our educational system functions now. Extuitive is not really one of the better models, because extuitive learning is information comes from the outside in. Intuitive is information that comes from the inside out. Reductive or deductive reasoning is reasoning that isolates a subject, isolates a query, and deduces down to the answer. But the problem with deductive reasoning, which is very useful till it's not. Deductive reasoning can get us a cure. It can get us a medicine, but it will completely miss the ton of effects on the environment, overall side effects. See, inductive reasoning is an interesting thing because it arrives in many ways from the inside out. Your biologic organism, your body, this is something that gets forgotten often. The body created the brain, not the other way around. And the nervous system doesn't stop with the CNS, the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. You have this whole peripheral nervous system. Your body is a reality conversion machine, right? Now, add to that these insights, and I promise this will all fit in. The ancients were so brilliant. I was teaching about the three cauldrons out in the Cauldron of Poesy, where it's spoken of a lot, an old Druidic poem. Speaks of a cauldron in the belly, cauldron in the heart, cauldron in the head. And ultimately what it's talking about is where consciousness pools and heats up. Heating meaning its energy increases, its life increases, and then may boil over into the next cauldron, then into the next. Now, we have known this all our lives, and I can prove it to you. We've known it intuitively. First of all, your body has more information than you can imagine. It is the process of millions, not hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution, all the way from microbial through the reptile era, to here. By the way, I was doing the workshop up in Massachusetts once. I owned this farm. It was so cool. And because I got to minister to the ducks and the sheep, which I always enjoy. But I was talking about until the witch or the magic worker can feel the pulse of a stone, and the ones that I teach, they haven't quite arrived yet, because you have to feel the aliveness that runs through everything, life that runs through all. And so I started talking about fossils and dinosaurs and such. And I said that we also have to extend our awareness beyond Homo sapien, hominid forms of ancestry, and understand that our ancestral stream goes all the way back to energetic ancestors. From there through single cellular, multicellular, plants, mycelium, fish, or definitely reptiles. When I got there, this man stood up and said, I am not acknowledging dumb lizards as my ancestors. So what I said to him was, I said, okay, then you should surrender anything that they gave you. You don't want those old dumb lizards in you. So give me your lungs, give me your stomach, give me your spleen, give me your brain. Oh, I'm sorry, your spinal cord's got to go too. Give me, I said, don't you understand? The mammalians came from the reptilians. My dear, if the reptiles, if you do not honor those ancestors, now you are putting a block in yourself, a spiritual block that's blocking off a reign of life that was the longest reigning life on the planet. Y'all realize that the dinosaurs reigned for 150 million years. They've only been gone 62, 63. So needless to say, we're not feeling, we are the expression of that whole epic of ancestry. This is something you start to really learn as you do fairy work, because fairy work is an underground or underworld tradition. Okay. And I want to do some processes with y'all. The underworld, I've done a lot of work over the years to try to both keep the poetic image and the poetic power of what the underworld is, but also to demystify it some, because the underworld is the inner world, because there's an illusion, a visual illusion that there's an up world and a down world. The truth is that's only because of the way we're constructed. There's really an out there world, a right here, not even world. There's an out there state, a right here state, and an inside subtle state. And though it seems like there is gradations between them as if they're separate worlds, they're really not. And they're substrata and they're like an onion, right? And so these concepts of upper world, underworld, all this, that they are interpenetrating realities, right? I always love Horton Hears a Who. The Horton Hears a Who concept is, you know, remember the Horton the elephant, and he's got, I think it was a dandelion, wasn't it? And Whoville was on the little dandelion fluff. And like, we're here, we're here, we're here. Well, there is a book called The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies, written by Reverend Robert Kirk, a Episcopal minister in Aberfoyle, Scotland, in the late 1700s. I believe 1700s, not 1600s. Or maybe 1600s. I may be off on that one. Well, Reverend Kirk wrote, that is the seminal text on Gaelic fairy tradition. And what Reverend Kirk did, he was amazing. He kept hearing his parishioners talking about these sort of beings and these things that you must do and you must not do. And they're speaking about them with fear and with reverence. And he found himself wanting to know more about what are they talking about. So he realized that there was something in the local culture, something sacred that he didn't understand. He wanted to understand. So he asked them and they told him some things. And he went around. Now, y'all, this is during a time of inquisitions, right? When even the slightest mention of such things could have you, before an inquisitor. This man traveled all over the county, collecting information from the different elders, the different people, the farmers, the people who knew the traditions. And he put that together into this book that I mentioned. If you don't have it, it's a must. It's a must-have. Now, some would say this is what caused his disappearance. The lore is that he went up on the Fairy Knoll up behind the church. How many people have been there? I've been there. Anybody else on here been to Reverend Kirk's? Reverend Kirk's grave, the church and the Fairy Knoll there is like the Holy Land, for people who study traditional fairy magic. It's like the Holy Land, because the book that he wrote, it recorded more of the oral tradition, not the part of it that's like tells what they look like, it tells what flowers, what things, and some prohibitions. This went much further. What are they made out of? What do they do? Where do they come from? What's their roles? You name it. It's all in there. In that book, he says something, kind of a Horton Hears a Who thing. He said, on every level of life is levels of life. Now, this is hundreds of years ago. Every level of life, there's levels of life. Now, interestingly, here's this man going also around the country, around the county, getting all this information, never stirred inquisitorial attention at all. Now, there's mixed reasons why that could be so. Certainly, he had position. He also had created the first Gaelic Bible, where he translated the Bible into Gaelic, so he was very respected. That could be another. But I think it's more like the fairy queen of that area wanted him to record this stuff, wanted him to get it. But then there was a point when most of us, and even some of the locals, have recorded these comments that he knew too much. And she told him, do not publish this book. And he didn't get it into publish. Someone else did it. I can't recall right off who. It might have been Oscar Wilde that got it. I'd have to look, and I could find that out for you. But it got published later. And so to keep it from being published, she took him into the fairy knoll. His body was found up on the fairy knoll. He was in a comatose state, and later died. Or that's what one part of the lore says. Another part of the lore says actually there was items of his found up there, but he was never found, and that the grave is empty. And in closure on that lore, they say that he only had one chance to get out of the fairy realms when the queen took him. And what had to happen was that I think it was a christening that was going to go on, and he was to attend in spirit form this christening. He would be allowed to arrive. His best friend was there, and he came. He haunted his best friend, which scared him, and told him, "When you see me, take out your dagger, wave it across my head 3 times, and that will break the spell. Then I'll be able to, be home again. But if you do not, I'm gone forever. It's only one chance." Because she let him attend this event because it was a sacred event. And once the fairies give you their word, they cannot break it. So he got there, he showed up, everyone saw him, and the best friend got so scared that he didn't wave the thing. And he's there as what's called one of the Order of the Justified Men. It's very sexist, but the Order of the Justified Men. So Kirk, one of the things that Kirk left for us all, and I'm so glad, was that these beings that we see as fairy, and there's conjecture about where the word even comes from, whether it's an old form of Gaelic, whether it's a form of Breton language, whether it's from Persia. In some ways, they all hold a little bit of weight because they all translate into similar meanings. Shining ones, the people of enchantment, was it the people who live in the hollow spaces of the land? That's what the Peri are in the Persian tradition. But what they're ultimately about, and why this is important to understand the underworld now and the fairy beings now, is they were a coexisting order of beings. Now, I told this story when we were on the last time, but I need to tell it again because it's at the very crux of how I teach the tradition. And this was when I was a little boy, because I grew up as a Southern Appalachian boy. And so about a couple times a month, there's this old dude. He would come down to see my mama. He'd come down from the Blue Ridge. He lived up in the mountains. And on his way to the farmer's market there in Frederick County, he would stop to see my mom, and they would have coffee, and they'd talk about stuff, and then he'd come see me. I was always interested in the old folks, honestly. I didn't hang out with kids. I only hung out pretty much with ghosts and old folks, and ghosts because I love them. I love spirits, and old folks because there was so much you could learn. And I knew this as a little boy. So this particular time, he talked to my mom, and he wanted to tell me about the fair folk. What they called them was the cousins, where I come from, simply the cousins. They didn't use the F word because that's a word used mostly by the British. And these are mostly Scottish and Irish folks, in that part of Appalachia. So when I tell you the story of what this man said, now, I'd like to say I remembered it all, and I didn't. I was a little fellow. My mom wrote down this stuff because she knew it was going to be important. And plus, he would share charms because the elders had already noticed that I had a propensity for memorizing charms. And these charms are for healing, for weather, all kinds of things. So every time he'd come, he'd give me a charm, and then he'd give me more and more and more, and I memorized them. And so that day, he taught me the charm, and then he taught me about the fair folk. But the charm, I mentioned it the last time. Any of you weren't on here to get it. This is an old traditional one. It was to get it to rain, if y'all ever need it to rain. But you got to have a knocking rock. And a knocking rock is a rock half in the land, half out. Doesn't have to be exact proportions, but it's got to be part in, part out. It's between the worlds, and or twixt and tween. And then you just get a pail of water and some old rags, right? Because you can get more than yourself doing it. You can get other people out there doing it with you. And what you do is you're going to dip that rag in the water, and then you're going to slap it against the rock real hard while saying this charm. And then we're going to wave it around. You'll see how it works. It goes, you dip it, I abjure the blood and all its stains to blacken the skies in witchcraft's name, to raise the wind and bell the dame and bring the rain and bring the rain. So it's the pelting rain and then the winds, right? And so the wording was, I abjure the blood. And I didn't know, by the way, for years, I thought that meant I call the blood. And then I found out, of course, later, it means I reject it. You know, and the reason it's saying that is the blood of Christ it's talking about, because Christ is a solar tradition. And if the solar rays are covering the world, it's not going to rain. You know, so it's, I abjure the blood and all its stains. Basically, he's saying, Jesus, you're all right, but back off, dude. Get in your lane. This is not your lane, right? Abjure the blood and all its stains to blacken the skies in witchcraft. And one of the few I ever learned that the W word was used. And that says to raise the wind, all right, that makes sense, and bell the dame, to beautify the lady, because then when the needed rain comes, it falls, she turns green, she blossoms, you know, to bell the dame and bring the rain and bring the rain. So that's how he got my attention first, because I always loved the charms. And I had that thing memorized before he even left. As long as it had rhymes, I could, you know, remember it. So did y'all get that? If you want, I'll say it one more time if you need. But this is an old traditional one. And remember about a knocking rock. You want to have a knocking rock. If you have one on your land, all the better. Or somewhere that you go and do your magic. It's, again, a rock that's half in, or basically part submerged, part out. You know, all the better if you can get one that's sort of got quartz in it.
I put it in the chat. Could you check and see if I got it right?
It's in the chat. Let's see. Where do I go? Oh, chat. There it is. I abjure the blood and all its stains. Oh, to blacken the skies in witchcraft's name.
Oh, this one.
And that's literally the only charm I ever learned from Appalachian folk that had the W word in it, the witch word. The other time I ever heard the word witching was, sometimes they would say someone was a witch, but they made water witching, which was dowsing, you know. So that was one part of what he did. Now, folks, they're in traditional folk cultures, there's ways that the elders set your destiny. You know, you don't always know them, you probably don't usually know them when they're happening. That old man, and it's interesting, Mom would let me be with him. She didn't like him using the witchcraft word, but she wrote it down anyway. She said, you know, the elders are giving it. So he set my world, he set me on the course of both witchcraft and fairy tradition at that time. Conjure, I was already doing it, was because that was just in the community. So that was the charms, and that was the witchcraft piece. But then he says, because I thought he was done, because really I was listening to him teach the charm, and then this piece on fairy stuff. I was listening attentively, somewhat interested, but he had a can full of ginger snaps. And as a little boy, and I haven't changed much, I would do anything to get at those ginger snaps, right? So I was all attentive to get at those ginger snaps, and I was rewarded. So he said, I'm getting ready to get up. He says, no, Mike, they call me Mike back there. He says, sit your butt back down. He says, you got to make right with them folk. Now, interestingly, I think back and I remember thinking, well, who'd I upset, right? I'm a little bit thinking who'd I upset, but I did know them folk was one of the names they'd call the cousins. And all I knew about the cousins really was they lived in the woods. They were older than time. You did not offend them. If you spoke about them, you spoke in reverence. And from time to time, you know, when you never walked near the woods or in the woods with food or beverage or anything, and not at least make an offering of a little of it, you do better to, before you go all the way in, right at the edge. Everything was about edges, where like an island in a creek, or where the clearing meets the woods, you know, things like that, are part this, part that. And so he said, you got to make right with them folk. And I was thinking, mom says, you know, Mike, sit down, listen. This is really important. And he says, you got to make right with them folk. They can snatch your prayers before they reach the ears of God. And that's a chilling statement. They can snatch your prayers before they reach the ears of God. And of course, as a little boy, I'm thinking, oh, someone can snatch your prayers. And I even asked him, I said, you're talking to the devil? And he goes, oh no. He even said much older. And he says the devil's pretty dumb. And conjure, the devil is seen as dumb. Sometimes Jesus is not terribly swift either. Old Jack is the one who's swift, right? Jack or John, these are the spirits of the trickster conjurer kind of spirit. But they still were, spiritual, and they were respectful. So he said they could snatch your prayers before they reach the ears of God. And then wait, there's more chilling this. It goes, they're the original ancestors. We're the visitors. I'll say that again. They're the original ancestors. We're the visitors. He goes, and when we break the laws of nature, we can't go to God for help because he don't know how. He gave the world to them. Now, when I told RJ Stewart, who's one of my, he is the one teacher who really affected me the most in my fairy work. And RJ said, in that one little story is more traditional lore, than a lot of whole books. And I didn't know it. I knew it was important. I knew there was something, this whole concept of, snatching your prayers, can't go to God because he don't know how. And that reminds me of an old saying that Mom reared me up on. And that was this. God left, well, actually how it came out to me, Mom one day comes in and I was praying. And she goes, who are you praying to, baby? I said, God. She goes, he ain't listening. I was a little boy. I'm like, why am I doing this? This is awful. She goes, no, he's busy, the universe and all. She goes, God left everything in the hands of helpful spirits. Now, I didn't know how profound that was until much later in my life. And the helpful spirits that we're all in the hands of is our ancestors. We come from a stream of the unseen. And like a river, we rise up in high tide. That's our life expressed. We descend in low tide, and through our dreams and through our death. And we're in a constant rhythmic relationship that goes between seen, unseen, and thresholds in between. There's the life, the afterlife, and the interlife. And just like when we breathe out, then there's a threshold, and then in. And then on the way out, there's a threshold, and then out, so does life. I was chatting with Priestess Miriam Shamani, who is a voodoo priestess, a very respected elder in New Orleans, and we've been friends for many, many years. And we were on our way to Mardi Gras together. And what does a fairy, seer, and witch and a voodoo elder talk about? Death, of course. So we got talking about death, and it was so funny. She goes, yes, death, the private side of life. And I remember I thought, oh, that's so wise. And then I said, yeah, when life goes private, when life goes internal. And so these concepts are very important as you imagine the underworld, what the fairy realms really are. They are the multidimensionality of Earth itself. And if there's any one tradition that has preserved it, it's preserved it well. These beings are not gods and goddesses, although, there are people who've seen some of them because they're so powerful as gods and goddesses. And it heralds from a time prior to polytheism, pantheism, paganism, of animism, right? Now, what that elder who told me that story was making clear, they are the ancestors of all earth life. At another time, he told me, he said, they came here on the river of stars. And the river of stars is the extension of primal light and movement. From the first star ever lit on the altar of heaven, the primal star, to here. Now, in the teachings, what we think of as black holes show up. They talk about the utterance, that the first thing that was born out of the great nothingness was the utterance, the breathing forth. And do you know there's now a theory? No, I don't even think it's fully a theory. We have historically thought that black holes were the creation of dying stars. Yeah, a star that's died and imploded in on itself. No, that's one way. They now know, or I don't know if they've come to the conclusion of saying they know, but they're real close to talking about primordial black holes that breathe forth the stars. You know, and so these traditions, they know things, and they know things in an intuitive way. In Santa Cruz, when I was teaching about this stuff, this young man, brilliant young man, asked me, he said, Orion, how did they figure this stuff out? I said, they didn't. They let it out. You see, if you relax your inner being into the inflowing tide, as you like you relax yourself into that inflowing tide, and I'll show some ways that I do it, and expand that which you're seeking, what it is you want to know, you will quickly find the universe is very interactive with itself. And did you know the universe, that word comes from universa, one song. One song. And what a powerful concept. And so, and the universe is not divided against itself. And so we, as fingers on the hands of a greater state of being, and also in the work, we don't think of things as beings. We think of them as states of being. That's a powerful jump, because when we talk about states of being versus beings, you see, beings indicate you and I are really separate. The truth is, that's a huge illusion. The only reason we're allowed to hug, and I'm so glad we can, is because we're vibrating at a similar rate, and our molecules are bouncing off of each other. You're not even sitting on the chair, really, you're hovering above it. Your field and its field are bouncing off of each other. But shift that just slightly and you'd fall through each other. To quote Brigh, the fairy queen who I'm married to, have the symbiotic relationship with, she told me one day, she said, beloved, which she calls me that a lot, I love it. She goes, you're not as solid as you thought yourself to be. And notice the way she said that, you're not as solid as you thought yourself to be. Because she then went on with that sharing, and she said, beloved, your people are far denser than they should be. You know that, right? She said, you have thought yourself into the creation of a death that doesn't exist. She said, if you mean death of familiar shape, correct. She said, but when you die, you're spreading. You're spreading. And she said, when you're born, you're centralizing yourself. You're concentrating, deconcentrating, composition, decomposition. And so our attachment to this being what we are is the thing that causes us most suffering. When you work in the fairy tradition, you quickly have to learn that life has many forms, and consciousness has many levels and many states. That when you think of aliveness and consciousness, you got to think of embodied, disembodied, and never embodied. You know, but I joked to someone recently, what was it? Chili non-carne, chili con carne, and then the no chili. So it's like, we're right now embodied, or at least we think we are, but we don't know that for sure, because we're all solid to each other, but we all might be dead at the same time. We may be in the same dimension of existence. We don't know that we haven't gone thousands of years ago, you know, which I love that. I love reminding myself that. So there's embodied, disembodied, was embodied, localized, disembodied, non-localized, and never embodied, living particle wave. So the fairy tradition brings us to the threshold of consciousness that allows us to then pierce into the fullness of what we really, really are. right? Now, as we all know, I think as we're watching the shift into the age of Aquarius right now, we're watching every shadow that's hidden beginning to arrive, you know, which it has to. If we're going to move into an integrative consciousness that's co-creative, that is no longer fed by the illusion of isolation, which is the thing that gets us in trouble, then we've got to move into inductive, co-creative, inductive consciousness, co-creation, coexistence, community, but not just human. Now, I've been writing this book on stones and crystals and all that from a pantheist standpoint. And a little piece I wrote in, just in the whole thing, I don't have the whole thing memorized, but it says, we are all children of one mother, sister and brother, human and other. And we are, because ultimately the very mothers that we came into this life from are made of the same mother, you know. So how do we get there? And how is the underworld the unguent to the soul? Now, I have felt for a long time that, and this is why I've committed to the underworld, that when we look down, we're presenting the newest part of our brain to our place of arrival, right? Because see, life does not come from the above to below. Light does. Life rises from the below up. You know, light comes down and the earth takes it and changes those photons. Through the plant world, changes it into energy and changes it into all kinds of things that then we are able to be here and exist with. In fact, the soil is the digested wisdom of everything that's ever lived. It's an unbelievable organism. The underworld is a tradition of retrieval. It's a tradition of integrative consciousness, right? Instead of, I'm not trying to ascend, I'm trying to integrate. If I integrate, the deeper I go, the higher I go. But the higher I go, the more hyper-extended I go. And look at the traditions that are overworld driven only. The mind, the brain is getting separate from the heart. It puts the spirit and matter in some form of conflict, which is silly because they're expressions of each other. So I'd like to think that as we engage the underworld, we're making peace. We're making peace with our roots. Yes, there's shadow work to be done in there, you know. And in fact, it's in the, what is it? The Ballad of True Thomas, I believe, where it says, and he's on the back of this horse and with the fairy queen. She's taking him to the fairy realms. And this horse moves fast as the wind. The truth is fast as light. And he says, on and on and on we rode, we wove through rivers of blood, a boon to the knee. We saw neither sun nor moon, but heard the roaring of the sea. She's talking about taking him through stratas of consciousness. But they come to this one level that he must move through to get to the fairy realms, right? Because the fairy realms is a realm filled with starlight. No sun nor moon, but starlight, and you can hear the roaring of the sea. This tells you two things. It's made of primordial movement and primordial light. Primordial light is the original plasmatic pulse that gives the life to our world. The amniotic, the sound of the sea is the gestational amniotic state of Earth's life's pre-arrival. So when we go down, we're moving through form, preform, gestation. And in doing so, we're retrieving pieces of ourselves. So I would like to do some work with y'all while we have the time. Is that okay? Does anyone have questions as I'm going through all this stuff? And does anything not make sense or?
Well, no, but I had my hand up for quite a while because.
Well, shoot, how'd I miss it?
I don't know. I saw it. That's like right there. But anyway, I've been taking everything that you've been saying, and as I usually do, I try to wrap it around my own image of reality. So I want to basically talk about that just a bit and then ask how it sits with you. Because I see that the mind has 3 levels. The rational consciousness, which is the part of your brain that says, yeah, you want that bag of potato chips. And then there's the rational subconscious, which keeps your liver going and stuff like that. Below that is the unconscious. And that is the bridge between the rational subconscious, which is the intuitive mind, and the void, which is where everything comes from. Mm. And I was just fascinated to learn that, well, this year, last year, that those lunatics who study quantum physics actually have a formula for the void.
Whoa, really? Oh my. That got my
attention. Really. And what they did is they kept going down and say, all right, well, here's an atom, fine. What's it made of? Protons and neutrons. Well, what are those made of? Quarks. What are those made of? And that's when they hit the quantum foam. Mm-hmm. This boiling sea, and every so often something goes out of it, just like spaghetti sauce onto your stove, and then things go back into it.
It's just sound effects I love.
Okay, good. And that was bad enough, but at the same time, when I think about my 20-odd years of Zen practice and trying to reach the void, which you can't reach because that's where the final God resides and from which everything else evolves, then they find a formula for it. And then some wise ass said, if you add these terms, that little blip that just popped out of the foam might not be a quark. It might be an entire universe that just had its big bang. Yes. And so here we have some relatively solid mathematical convincing that, yes, the universe is constantly destroyed and recreated all the time because the foam is always boiling. We'll skip the part about that's another person's universe. But when you look at the Zen and the Buddhist tradition, that all things that you can perceive are impermanent. And you think about the universe, you say, well, that's not impermanent. Billions of years is a lot, but it's still temporary. So I kind of sit with that. And I'm trying to integrate that into this idea, well, mostly the levels of perception that go with your concept of the underworld, which I see as kind of the realm of the intuitive mind, not necessarily down to the void.
It goes right to the edge of it, just to the edge of it.
Right to the edge of the void. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I wanted to fact check again, because I have been drawn to Zen because the construction of my mind is a lot more of the rational consciousness and a lot less of the intuitive consciousness. So I have to find other ways. Chip Khan, I've talked about how most of these divination tools don't work for me, but Zen works for me. And I can sit there and I can go into this where they say like mind and body drop away. And you're in this place where, well, I have once in my lifetime had that experience of being in a place where I was everywhere at once and so forth. And so Christians call it coming into the presence. And I realized I was staring right into the face of the void here and perceiving what was beyond it, at least as much as I could without exploding, because there are lots of scriptural references that say you really can't look God in the face and not die. So I've been just really kind of fitting in all the things that you say into this matrix, and I'm kind of curious about your reaction to it.
I loved everything you said. Honestly, first of all, when you mentioned a concept that I heard, I was in Wales a few years ago. They were having a conference called Shamanic Lands, and the whole subject of the weekend was Michael Dunning. Some of you might know Michael. He was there, and I was there, and it was Underworld, right? And one of the guys that got up to speak before I did, was a quantum physicist or quantum theory mechanic, I think. And I loved him. He referred to the underworld as the realm of quantum foam.
He said quantum foam.
Yes.
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 Oh God, you're the
That's why
second person on Earth who recognized that term.
When you said that, that's why I was like, yes. And he said that, and I raised my hand. I said, and it caught him by surprise. I said, don't describe what it is. Describe what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are going, I don't get, no. I said, trust me on this. Just trust me, please. Trust me. What's it feel like? What's it feel like in your body when you think of it? Think in metaphors. Yeah. Metaphors start to get you then. You can approach the void through the metaphor, but not through the rational thought.
No, you can only experience these things. You can, you know, the minute you have a word or a number for it, you're screwed.
And
but if you simply live,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you live in the realm of experience, there are no words. It's just like you taste a strawberry. You don't talk about what it tastes like. It's just, you just experienced a strawberry. And that's what we're talking about here.
And if you want to express what it tastes like, you can't go, you know, it's this, this, and this. You know, you got to get into your sensuality. Let your sensuality speak of it. And
what you do is you give the other person a strawberry.
You said it. You said it. So I loved what you were saying. My experience, I work a great deal with the holy and formless fire that abides in the depths of the universe, the great breathing forth. And what I have found, the way to come into the presence of the void, and the void, I found we can flow in and out of it, not into its depths, but just the flowing in and out. All we have to do is attach to our breath, move with the breath, and which is something I was going to show in a moment. Whatever divine being or whatever consciousness that put the concept of breathing into us was brilliant. Because what breathing does, we know about oxygenation and all that, it does more. It expands space within, right? And then it releases that back out. Our lips are on the mouth of the eternal right now. And so, because our lips are on space, really our atmosphere. But then when we get beyond that, it's space, and they're all intertwined. They're expressions of each other. So ultimately, my mouth right now, your mouth right now is on the eternal. And one of the visionary things I teach people is to relax a moment and know that your mouth is on the mouth of space. First, breathe in the spaciousness. Fill yourself with the primordial movement. Let it flow into the deepest recesses that are occupied by that which should not be. And let it bring space into you. And then breathe out again into the mouth of eternity. So first, I'm drawing breath from, and I'm breathing my breath into. I'm receiving original space, and I'm releasing some of my space, as much as my has space. And then you reverse it. Feel the eternal breathing breath into you, and then drawing it out. One of the things we do, we go, with every breath I take and release, I cast a spell of love and peace. And to attach magic to that primordial movement. Now, here's something I teach my folks a lot. It is one of the most simple techniques, and I adore it. And I hope you'll enjoy it. It's called I call it the pause point, like pushing the pause button. Now, when you rest your awareness in your breathing, now don't concentrate on it. Don't focus on it, but literally just notice. Just notice it and how it feels. This ever-present rhythm. A rhythm we share in common with our ancestors, with all life, with the universe itself. So just as you're being with your breath, not necessarily modulating it, then bring your awareness to one or both of your hands and let your hands synchronize with your breathing. The chest goes in, the hands go in. As chest expands, your hands go out. Just be with that a moment, resting your awareness in your breathing. Then open your eyes and let your eyes rest on your finger, the way you let your eyes rest on a windowsill or anything else when you're daydreaming, because we're not really looking at something, just letting our eyes rest. I wear a ring on my finger that I love the stone, so I often just look at that ring and notice it as the hand is moving with the breath. And all of my awareness is now resting in the rhythmic movement of my breath. And then here it comes, and then spaciousness arrives, and you can expand that out into the room. And then return back to just your regular outer thought. Let your hands rest. Did you feel the peace? That's literally notice your breathing. There's too much, too often what happens is we tell people, discipline your breathing. Well, if you do that, now you've got the brain very involved. It's trying to saddle your breathing. Like I was at Rites of Spring once, and I was coming out of the dining hall, and there was this guy sitting there, and he looked frustrated. And I said, "What's wrong?" Now, that's very Appalachian. We don't say what's wrong. I said, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "I'm making myself relax." And I said, "Oh, how's that going?" He says, "Not very well." I said, "Can I offer some thoughts and that may be helpful?" He said, "Sure." I said, "You can't make yourself relax. That's contrary to the very concept to allow yourself to relax." I said, "Your body knows how to relax. Allow your brain to surrender to the body." And I taught him this, and he loved it. And I said, "Do you feel anything?" He says, "I want to go nap now." I said, a lot of wisdom is something that you allow. Just like there's so many things your body knows. Your body is the concentrated effort of many, many life forms over millions of years, distilled. Pieces of them impressed in you, and then the ancestral wisdom that comes by eating the ancestors. Everything we eat is made of the soil that we live on. You know, it is the vitamins, the vitaminos, the little lives, which is what a vitamin means. And, you know, all the nutrients that our body needs to stay composed coming from the land. What else do you think's in the space between the particles? The wisdom, the knowledge. To stay informed, we have to eat the earth. And well, the earth repays that later, you know. But this, how did that feel when y'all did that? Were you able to plug into that? You look down here to the chat room. It's the thing about whether it's entering the perfect peace, the void. What I've noticed, I think often when people say I want to be still, and I say, well, that won't necessarily happen because your electrons are moving around, things are moving inside you. If you would consider this concept, and that is coming into a state of non-conflictedness. Some years ago, I call this, by the way, jumping off the battlefield and onto the dancing floor. You know, and the reason I use those metaphors, one day I was watching these ballroom dancers on TV, and I was a trained belly dancer, and not doing too much of that right now. I'm in a wheelchair at the moment, but and I was watching them and how they were in sync, and they were just like gliding, like one being. It was beautiful to watch. And I realized how in sync they were, how they knew how to relax into each other's harmony and flow, and let the music actually carry them around. It was really something to watch. And it reminded me of when I was being taught how to travel shimmy. You know, travel shimmying is, you know, you'll see the and they're moving, you know, they're walking. Well, I tried it and I looked like an epileptic duck. It was not a pretty sight. And so my teacher comes over and she rubs me on the belly, which I really liked. And she said, Orion, honey, let go. She said, your body knows what to do. She said, relax into your center. Your body knows where it's at. She said, relax into your center and then let it move you around and then shimmy. And I did. And all of a sudden, boom, there I was. A lot of teaching, I don't really often call myself a teacher. I think of myself as a coach, maybe a coach, because there are wisdoms in us that we inherently have and know. It's a matter of unlearning some things and allowing others. You know, there is so much wisdom that will arise. And the moment people touch these primordial states, they remember it. They remember once they could, because, you know, all a habit is a thought repeated over and over and over, you know, until it forms, you know, a pattern. And so it's like dancing. When you're learning dance, you have to get each form into your body, practice and practice and practice till you don't have to think of it anymore. It's in your body. I recommend to folks that to approach the other world, let alone the concepts like the void, the great nothingness, the Zen. I love Zen. What you're really talking about is refreshing. You're talking about defragging and refreshing and all these things. You're getting to get at something that's already there, but that we interrupt. Like the mind can be like mind storms that go on. And so the state of allowance, and the reason I like the pause point is the way it's working is there's this thing we carry with us all the time, and it really is our path to peace. Breathe. Breathe. Breathing is our relationship with eternal presence and spaciousness. And when people are upset and when they're all this, they're often just either hyperextended or full. They're so full that they can't find themselves at the moment. You know, and in the way our neurology works in many ways, we've got the voice of many, the voice of few, and the voice of one. And if we can't reach for it and grab it. We have to allow ourselves to be like a feather in the wind. So I was down at the Chesapeake Bay one day and I saw this shell that I wanted. And after several tries of getting shells just like that one and not getting them and getting annoyed, I stopped myself and I said, all right, breathe. Push the reset button. This was before I developed this technique. And so I was looking at the water and the shells that I wanted. And I thought, why did I keep missing them? And then here's what I discovered. Reaching for inner states of peace so that we can feel non-conflicted states and let inspiration arrive instead of living only by memory, but instead actual new inspiration that arrives from the great void. And to allow that, to also reach this states of peace, we have to, wait a minute, I just lost what I was going to say. We have to do what I had to do to get that seashell. Now here's what I did. Two things that I had to be aware of to get that seashell. One, I have no control over and can only synchronize with. And then the other, I have total control with and need to move softly with. So one is I had to just move into a rhythm like those dancers of the motion of the ocean and the velocity of my reach. The ocean or the bay in this case, whoosh, you know, comes in and out, has this rhythm. And if I move faster than that rhythm, I'm going to push this and harder. I'm going to push that shell right into the undertow. And if I go too slow, I'm going to lose it because the undertow is going to take that coveted shell right out. And I'll never forget when I listened, I closed my ears a minute, and I just start rocking because I'm going to show you a breath form that is very, very cool for this. And I started rocking, and I just it wasn't even a hard reach. I just like water to water, went in, got a handful of those shells, brought it out, and you could barely see the water disturbed. It's because I moved into a rhythm with that. Now, one year when I was at Glastonbury, there's a gentleman there who we later became really good friends named Jacobus Swart. Jacobus Swart is the inheritor of William Gray's Sangreal Sodality. William Gray was one of the foremost Kabbalists of the century, and he also had a major Grail school. And so we were both in Glastonbury to teach, and this man was incredible. Okay, and he was showing, and he gifted me this because we gifted each other two things. He knew a chief of, I think it was Zulu chief, that had told him when he comes to England, he's going to meet, are y'all ready for this? This is a true story. You're going to meet this bald guy. He's got a weird beard, like made of shadow and light. That's what he said. Shadow and light. He has pointed ears, which I have. Ask him for 3 silver coins. He'll know what it is. Well, this guy, Jose Matsua was his name, and he was dying. But he couldn't quite die. He was having a hard time unattaching from his body. So what he wanted, and I had them with me, was 3 mercury head dimes, which we use in Southern root work to pay the spirits of the crossroad, the dark rider. So Jacobus comes to me and he says, all right, he said, the chief said this, you look just like what he said, with 3 silver coins so that he can die, make any sense. I said, absolutely. And I went to my room and I got him. Here you go. And he gave me this as a gift. This breath form was given to him by heretic Kabbalists in Israel. And as he said, the heretic Kabbalists, in other words, the real McCoy. And they were folk Kabbalists, and it's called the ocean breath. And now I find the ocean breath to be extremely useful for sensitizing and then later synchronizing with the rhythm of the etheric tide, right? The etheric tide is the reason that we do magic at phases of the moon, because the phases of the moon doesn't just rule the watery nature of liquid, of water, physicalized water, but the etheric tides as well, the drawing out from the other world into this world and the receiving of it. It's a intravisible state of being that magic works with, right? Very malleable. And so we're working with the etheric tide. Now, the etheric tide is not just moving during times of full moon and dark moon and all this, it's moving all the time. And one of the many ways that we can feel the tides moving is also, it's not just move like water, it moves like breath, it's breathing. And the skin of the earth, the surface structures have pores in it, just like our skin does. Thinning places, breathing places. So we've got breathing places, breathing times, breathing states, right? So things are this rhythmic kind of relationship. So what this does, if you do this often, is it tunes you into that movement, whether we think of it in terms of the etheric tide, or if we think of it in terms of the non-embodiment, embodiment, expression, disembodiment, that rhythm, whether we're talking about rising from the river of blood, expressing, descending into the river of blood. And so they got birth, life, death, if you want to think of it that way. So all of it's about this rhythm. And if you tune into this rhythm, y'all are doing it in a way that you may not even notice. The whole purpose of the witch's wheel of the year, as they call it, the Sabbats and Esbats, and that piece of turning your awareness towards the movement of the tides, right? Now, I was taught that see the circle as the spindle of destiny. And the spindle of destiny works with the movement of primal light, primal light, stellar light, solar light, into the land, back up, out. So the primal movements look like a spindle, goes up, down, in, out, around. And our focusing on the gates of the directional forces is about tuning into the movement of starlight to sunlight, into the earth light, into life flows, life forms, descending back in, rising up. It's a constant boom, 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 boom. Is this making sense? These rhythms and all the sacred movements will often incorporate up, down, in, out, and around. Okay, so when we call ourselves witches, magicians, whatever term, there's terms, you know, turn your attention towards the movement of these tides sensitizes and synchronizes yourself with the spindle of Mother Fate, the movement of primal light, well, primal light and primal movement, and to its states of, and you know, energy or to particle and wave, rhythm. So the circle, as we think of it, not necessarily the ritual construct itself, but the concept of those gates and the movement of all that, that is the primal goddess. That's why you could destroy every single effigy, every image, all, and destroy nothing. Our gods are eternal. You cannot, to destroy them, you have to destroy every particle, every rhythm, every piece of life and light. And so they're immortal. So now let's plug into this constant gestational, breathing, rhythmic state of reality. Now this helps to melt what in the folkloric fairy tradition is called the soul cage. So many of our folks are, they have, well, not many, all of us have different components of the soul cage, built of fears and built of the illusion of isolation. The place, my psychiatrist friend out in LA calls them the masturbations, you know, which are this must be this must be this, not leaving the actual breathing room that reality has. We're watching us be catapulted into that right now. One of our pioneers is transgender folks. They're taking us towards fluidity of gender. That's the highest voltage of this transition. Then guess what's coming next? Fluidity of consciousness. And when that happens, we won't think things quite as solid. And that's what we're going to watch what this brain can do. So this technique works like this. And this helps us tune into the inflowing tide, the outflowing tide, the rhythm. Basically, the rhythm itself is a teacher. And the sound of this breathing technique is like this. With an indrawing breath, you go, ah. So it's indrawing, ah, except without the sound coming out. It goes, ah. Now, the way I was taught, ah, is the sound of space. Now, you want to bring a place to peace, mimic space. So just feel this for a minute. Let me get a drink or something so I can do this breath. This isn't the ocean breath. This is just letting you feel while a lot of these breath forms start with ah. So the sound of space is now, you might have noticed that there's a peacefulness that arises. And when you do, it's just this inward ah. One of the breath forms, not one I'll teach tonight because it's really, it takes some work. And this is called the serpent and the whale, W-E-L-L. And it is the movement of light in and out of the void. Sometimes it's called the Anyahia. Now, this is spooky because to do this, you have to be moving breath in and out, right? Like the serpent in and out of this whale. And you have to roll your breath. So I'm hoping I can do this well tonight because my allergies been up. Oh, excuse me. Isn't that bizarre? He goes, so you're doing double rolls of breath, double in, double out, then rolling them. And it sounds like multiple people or multiple voices. You want to enchant a place or weird everybody out, one or the other, you know, that breath. Now the ocean breath. So the ocean breath moves with some movements too. So the movements, that's when I just touched something that made your screen small, is That the movements are, I'm going to turn to the side because that's going to be easier. So when you breathe in with ah, you're going like a wave. You're sort of going like this. Like so, it goes in, all right. The outer express part of it, excuse me, is that's the inner, then like steam coming through a pipe with the tongue slightly up on the tangent, it's called. So it goes, I'll do the breath first, then the movements again. Oh, wait a minute, no, it's not. I said he, that's wrong one. Sorry, wrong breath. It's So it goes. Now the movements with it, this is not giving me the kind of visual I want to give you really see. So what I'm doing is I'm going like a wave, although I look kind of like a, I don't know, a prairie dog or something. A meerkat. So it goes. Once more. And it's even better when it's just a little slower and you find the rhythm of your breathing where it's so comfortable. Like the really comfortable state for me is more like with the arms not as high, like kind of relaxed. It's like I like my she's to go out longer, and softer, like instead of not shh, more like a shh. Now, once I was out of Pantheon in San Jose, I was teaching, and there was easily 500 people in this room, and I was on a panel. And it was for the re-release of Sea Priestess. And Weiser was re-releasing it. And so they asked me to come up on a panel and talk about having inner contacts and what's like to live with inner contact, and to leave people with some piece of wisdom of some type or practice associated with the gestational states of reality, the Sea Temple mysteries. And so everyone went, and they were all awesome. And there were incredible people up there. Lilo Duquette was on there, who I just adore. And I led 500 people. Imagine the sound of this. Going. It sounded like he was standing at the edge of the ocean. Lilo Duquette, this guy is a very high-ranking Thelemite and really extremely wise, just jumps up and goes, "That was cool as shit." He goes, "Orion, that was the coolest thing I have ever seen." He said, "You took us all to the primordial waters like that." Greatest compliment he could have given me, for me, because the peace we are seeking is seeking us. The peace we are seeking is the uncontaminated, undivided conscious state that is our origins. In it is the gestational reality that will soothe the subtle senses. See, to borrow from my friend Michael Dunning, ooh, I'm running late. Michael Dunning, I just love him so much. He's from y'all's area. He is the U shaman, and it's like a brother to me. And he says we must cultivate an eye that embraces and receives, instead of an eye that grabs and eats. You see, people often say that they see the other world, whether that's discarnate human spirits or the elementaries or the fair folk or any number of otherworldly beings, often out the side. They'll see, and once they look straight on, they don't see it. It's because they're looking with an eye that eats and penetrates, and the subtle realities that interpenetrate ours, which are much larger than this one. This, where we live, where the locus of our consciousness often is actually akin to the shore. And as we know, we're more ocean and space than we are shore. The more we can relate to the subtle tides, the more we're able to push off from the places where we dock our consciousness, where we dock our awareness. There's immense healing when we place our boat back, or the boat of our being, back into the moving rhythmic tides of consciousness itself. The fairy tradition is so fascinating because it often says, if you go to steal the fairy gold, you will come out with straw in your hands. You have to go with the untainted heart of a child. And it says, I think I shared this saying in the last workshop, and then we'll take a minute and talk about that technique. And it is, meddle and mell with the fiends of hell, and a weirdless wight you'll be. But take and lend with the ferrymen, and you'll thrive until you die. And it's really saying meddle and mell, get all up in the business of and stir up the fiends of hell, meaning not the underworld spirits, but the greed and avarice and this disconnective and we and them, or us and them, and all the stuff that we see that rips our world apart, the things that cause us to pee in the water upstream and then wonder why it tastes bitter downstream. You know, this begins to dislodge us away from that. The thing is that we seek more than anything. The thing that drives people to workshops, the thing that drives them to churches, synagogues, temples, is homesickness. They know that they are, it's like people feel that they know something's wrong and they can't quite put their finger on it, but their intuition says something's imbalanced, something's off. And so they believe they've been exiled from wholeness for being human, when in fact our outcast, our cast out awareness that is caught in the illusion of isolation is only like that because it's a side effect of a rapidly growing nervous system that just grew so fast in the advent of fire. In my humble view, the fruit in Eden and all that, it is really, I believe that the serpent was lightning coming down the axis mundi, the billy tree. The fruit was fire. And when we take, and we were warned, if you take this fruit, you'll exile yourself. You won't be the same, but you'll also suddenly see yourself. But the truth is, when I read that particular piece of mythology, I think two things. I think that one, Eden hasn't happened yet. The exile was a warning of where we'd go, and we did. We exiled ourselves from the holism of nature, paganism, and other animistic and pantheist, the earth-centered spirituality is the ancestors rattling the tree, waking us up, because you cannot bless the fruits and curse the roots. That's how we're unearthing the wisdoms that we inherently know that are down at the very basis of the tree that upholds the very tree of life. My mother, when I was little, she had a lot of this folk wisdom. And she said, baby, there's 2 times that we go back to the tree in Eden. Well, there's 2 times we go to it, period. She said, the first one, she spoke of the apple. She said, we take the apple and we eat it. And with that, we were given free will. We could see ourselves as a separate being. And I said, well, when do we go back with the next one? Now, remember, I'm a little boy. So, how little kids often see things as very literal. And I said, well, when do we go back and what do we do with the second time? She goes, we go back to the tree and put the fruit back on. And I said, Mom, what's the fruit? And she goes, your heart. And of course, I'm thinking as a little boy, oh, right. But what she's saying is when we turn back towards our becoming, our place of arrival. And we bring both what we have discovered, as well as we bring that feeling of homesickness, that exile, that all it is again, is a central nervous system that got enamored with itself. And then when we turn back and go, I'm a part of a greater family, I'm an expression of this greater family, and we start to come back to it, then the fruit is making its way back to the tree. Underworld tradition, at least fairy, is about approaching the original ancestors. And they live in the hollow places of the land. In other words, they live in the coexisting dimension of the paradise of Earth, the original vision of Earth, undaunted, uncontaminated. As a part of understanding that, one year I decided I want to meditate on a couple of things. And that was heaven, love, and Eden. And this is just my words, but here's what came to me. Heaven is a state of non-conflictedness. Love is a state of harmony that pre-exists us. Love is a state of harmony that we fall into, that we allow, and it connects everything. And then Eden is a state wherein all things live from their core. Our job is to bring heaven to earth. Our job is to live from our core, non-conflicted. And the way to that is the original ancestors. We have to reach into the place of arrival, presenting the newest brain back to the earth, the oldest brain, the medulla, back to the heavens. The old was the old to the new, and the ever arriving to the old, and reconsecrate ourselves in that way. I'm proud to be pagan. I'm proud to be an earth religious. I'm proud of us. It takes courage to step onto the cloud of unknowing, following a guidance that you don't even really know what it is, and unearthing the silenced wisdom keepers under 1,000, 2,000 years of indigenous genocide. Because in doing so, we had to clean off we had to cry for them. We had to feel some of the sorrow and unbind the mouth of the wisest gods and return the gods back to a total body through our bodies. I think very much that in some way we will help save our species. I really mean that. I've been watching this for years, watching what paganism, and when people were really honest about what called them to this, it wasn't mere curiosity. It was a drive, and a drive that didn't make any sense. We were defying reality. And here we are. So now, on behalf of each other, we've got to reach to the connective point of arrival, the earth, reach to the spaces between the particles. But to do so, we've got to like the pause point and the ocean breath. I just thought those are ways of feeling the presence of undivided peace within ourselves, the place of arrival in us. And then we, in that state of undivided peace, we allow the undivided, ever-arriving fountain of flame that rises from the core of our world, the pulsing, energetic, gestational life of the earth, to clean us off and bring us home. Because if we don't, we're going to be annihilated. I mean, we're at the beginnings of a mass species die-off. The threat has never been higher. The stakes are higher. Humans tend to do best, I think, unfortunately, when the heat is hot. But we don't need to. I don't know about y'all. Well, I think I do know about y'all. I don't want to see more suffering. I really don't. So the next step about reaching to the undercountry is we have to reach not just for ourselves or our species. We got to reach in unbearable compassion for the life of Earth that gives us so much and all the things that live for us. We got to do it for the bees. We got to do it for the trees. We got to do it for all of this. It's got to be a we thing, not an I thing. I like to play with those words. I often say the letter I is the eyes that do not see. The mysteries is a we thing. We as in us, and a we thing, the little people. But the power has always been in the little people. If you don't believe me, ask that virus that we're all dealing with. Viruses, microbes, electrons and protons, all these quarks, all these little, not quarks, all these little things that make up everything. So this is a taste of, there's more, there's so much more I'd love to do with all of you. But I wanted to get across more than anything that some of the wisest of practices are not practices where you're learning something. You may get information, but the information is not to lead your intellect into another exercise of the intellect. It's to lead you, give you language to describe something that you may already know when you allow it. Go with your breath. Move with that pause point. Just those two alone, I promise you, done often, will give you so many ahas. Keep it simple. We're in the middle of detoxing our brain. The other thing to lead you with, and this is just on some hemisync stuff. Right now, the left brain, I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, the left brain wants its wife back. And the left brain is causing problems that only the right brain can fix. And we can see it. Sometimes we create things intentionally so they'll go wrong, so that we have to fix it. And the only way to fix it is to let the other part of our brain speak. So there was one more quick technique. Next time, when you get a chance, if you have olive oil, this works just fine. But if you have some other anointing oil, get that oil. And the way I was taught to work with oils is liquid fire. You have to wake it up. When you take some of the oil, breathe your life onto it and speak to it, awaken unto life. Remember your power. Offer that oil up to the ancestor of all life, however you see it, and ask it if it will place the power to bring you back into the right flow, to bring your feet back into the right relationship with the directive of your spirit. I always say, oh, holy and formless fire, pour forth thy power into my redeemed, my exalted and redeemed, exalted and blessed ancestors. And then I ask them to help me as then I claim my crown. So you then take the power that enters into that, and you go to the back of your skull where the medulla is, and then draw a line with that oil across the fontanelle at the top, all the way to your third eye. Then take it around both hemispheres, back to the front, and then up to the fontanelle again. And you mark the fontanelle with some symbol, some sacred glyph, a pentagram, a cross, or whatever. I was always taught to do 3 of them. This is called claiming your crown. You know, and it's also a way that we ask the stream that we rode here on, and the stream we continue to ride, which is the ancestral one, to bless this, to awaken us, to grant us the crown of our own interior sovereignty. And then we bless all parts of the head. And this is just my little thing, because this is the old brain, this is the new brain, mommy brain. Was it old brain, new brain, daddy brain, mommy brain? So I'll do that often. It's just a silly thing I do, but it's kind of sweet too. Old brain, new brain. Let's see, mommy, daddy brain, mommy brain. You have to get it right on both sides. And then I'll get to here and go connect. Awaken unto life. Back to the crown, the fontanelle. And then you're crowned. You take a little bit of oil that's still in your fingers, and you mark the 2 elbows. This is from the conjure practices I grew up with. And the reason you mark then the elbows is to create what they call the triangle of light. The descension of the light into physicalization and the rise of it again. And you bless the 2 elbows so that what you reach for and what reaches to you is blessed. So there's a few techniques to play with. Again, Chupacan, I could keep going, but it is now getting a little late.
It really is.
Yes. Thank you for your patience, y'all, and allowing me to get some of this out.
On the other hand, if you have more, we're hoping you will be speaking at the con.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now when is that? I need to get that on my calendar because my little brain, I got a lot of stuff. I'm gonna get where's my, give me just a second, we get my calendar. So get that out.
We will work with you, if you want Friday or Saturday, morning, evening, or evenings, Monday through Friday. You pick a time, we'll work with you because, we're desperate to get you to come.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I love working with y'all.
I think you might also want, I hope that there will be things that you will want to see too. And I'm gonna note Bill had put his hand up a while ago too. So while you're looking for your calendar, Bill can ask a question.
Yes, because
Yeah,
you see me, but I'm listening. I'm just grabbing my calendar.
Yeah, I had one last idea to bounce off you for your reaction.
Yes, absolutely.
When I got into the Zen practice, one of the interesting things I noticed fairly early on, if you're following your breath in meditation, I noticed that as you go through the cycle, there's a brief pause at the bottom and a brief pause at the top. The brief pause at the bottom, my brain stopped making noise for a very short period of time. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced my brain shutting the hell up. What made that really interesting was I have a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And one of the 4 sections in it discusses a 4,000-year-old pre-Zen manuscript that specifically mentions that exact effect.
Beautiful. You found it because it's in you. That's the thing people don't
Yes.
understand. It's in you. It's there.
Wait, pay attention. And that's what
exactly.
happened.
Yep.
I saw it, but then I was really astounded to realize that, like I say, there's this whole thing is divided as a little series of verses, and then at the second line is always, and then there was one that just nailed it on the concept of how there was this pause, this suspension before you started breathing in again. And I have found that a wonderful anchor to use when I'm having trouble getting the monkey brain chatter to go away.
And
But I
that's
was curious
true.
which,
Wayne Dyer called it something. I'm trying to remember. He had a name for
did
it.
he now?
Yeah, because he loved it and he spoke of it. I'll try to remember that and find out.
Okay.
It's I have to look into some of it because I loved what he said. Because when he died, he said, "I'm just stepping back into my in-breath."
Excellent.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if I've left you with something to chew on after you leave here, then maybe I've done my good deed for the day.
You are a
I'm
good
glad
teacher.
you liked. I'm kind of glad you really liked what I had to say. That was
Absolutely
very gratifying. And you had a massive amount of really interesting, most of which I'd never heard before. So there's going to be this big integration process while the cement mixer of my mind kind of stirs this stuff all up.
I think that it's one of the cool things about having it recorded is that we could go back and watch it again and again and pick up things we didn't catch. I want to ask,
absolutely.
Before we do the paperwork of scheduling, is there any other questions that have arisen among the other people who are here?
Yeah, I'm definitely good. So
it was wonderful to meet you too. I think we've met before though, haven't we? Bill, you seem familiar.
Well, that's why I never went into a life of crime. I keep reminding people of people they know, but I don't think we've met. I missed your first session here, unless we managed to cross paths, because I'm up here in Syracuse, New York. So
there are only 200 faces. We just have to share them. That's all.
There's a saying in the craft tradition I come out of. It says, "Witches without," and this is just using the W word, but you can substitute. "Witches without fuss or bother, when chance to meet, never fail to know each other."
Well, there is that. It isn't a matter of you look familiar, is you feel familiar.
Yes.
You know, and I certainly sense a resonance there. I bet if we were to go off in a corner someplace, we could probably be up until 6 a.m., but it probably wouldn't be good for either of us.
You know what's funny? As long as I'm talking spiritual and magical stuff, and as long as I'm sort of literally steeped in that and we're wallowing in the wisdom, I can stay up for days. It's days.
I don't think
I
I
love
can stay up for days or anything anymore, but I could probably come close on that.
I'll bet you could. You're wonderful. It's a wonderful group of folks here. You know.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to stop recording and then you can stay on and then we will try and schedule you for.
Yes, let's do that. And then I
Okay,
better.
well, thank everybody and please remember to reserve for Changing Times, Changing Worlds, which is going to be
Right.
November 8th to 14th in 2000.
8th or 14th.
Yeah, in
All right.
2000.
Well, I got to bail because I got other things to do. In fact, I ended